the inspiration for this massive drive to get everybody boosted or vaccinated. Kids as young as 12 now required to be vaccinated twice. Everybody over the age of 18 has to get the booster. The inspiration for this is Omicron, the new variant that neither Boris Johnson nor anyone else knows anything about. They have no idea whether or not this new variant requires these new drastic measures that they're bringing about to get us all to get the vaccine. What's going on, David?
Well, I think, Kev, you're making more sense than the Prime Minister and the Cabinet to me. The fact is the COVID merry-go-round continues, doesn't it? I think the government is doing everything it can to destroy what's left of this country and society, and more importantly, people's mental health. I don't think people can take much more of this. And what I find really frustrating is the fact that, as you say, we don't know anything about this new variant. So mutations of viruses happen. It's a natural phenomenon. That's called antigenic drift. We don't know whether this virus is any more lethal, or this strain of the virus is any more lethal than the other strains of the virus. But what we do know from the early data from South Africa is it looks like it's a milder form of the disease. Now, we also, if you then factor into this, we also don't know whether the vaccines that we have, particularly those mRNA vaccines, so that's Pfizer and Moderna, whether these are actually effective against this new variant. We heard today from the chief executive of Moderna, him saying, well, because there are 24 mutations on the virus, our vaccine may not be good enough to counter it. Pfizer seems to think that theirs may well be better. So now we're in a situation where actually the one that you're using for the booster, because we are only using Moderna and Pfizer for that booster jab, for the third jab, now may not work, but at the same time, the government is now pushing everyone to get that jab. So that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. So the government is basically putting all their money on red, and I think it may come up black.
As I say, Boris has gone straight into Armageddon mode. You know, this new variant is as bad as the bubonic plague. Look out. Well, as you quite rightly say, in South Africa, where they discovered Omicron and found that the indications are that it is very mild, that it'll give you a bit of muscle ache, you'll feel very tired for a couple of days, and you'll get a slight cough, and then you'll recover. They are looking at us here in Britain, and indeed other governments around the country, around the world rather, in total bemusement. They're saying, why are you doing all this? The World Health Organization, of all organizations, said there's no need to bring in travel bans. In came the travel bans. Why is Boris, I mean, I hesitate to say overreacting because I don't know what this variant is either, but why is he reacting in such an extreme way to a variant that no one knows anything about?
Well, he's being lent on, isn't it? It's a political decision. If you remember, he was criticised for not locking down hard enough and fast enough earlier on. So I think he's trying to regain political capital by doing this. But the rules that he's brought in make no sense at all. So you're now having to wear a mask if you are out and about on public transport, or if you go into a garage, for example, in a nail bar or in a takeaway, but you don't have to wear one in a bar and restaurant. Now, as far as I know, the COVID virus doesn't know whether you're in a bar or a restaurant. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. We also know there's huge manipulation of data going on. If you remember, Amanda Pritchard was caught out because she said there were more people in hospital with COVID now than this time last year. Simply not true. We've also been told by the statisticians that actually the majority of people in hospital are unvaccinated. Once again, not true. So they're playing with data and they're using it as a political football. So what they're trying to do is to get everyone vaccinated. Now, clearly, one starts to even wonder, why are they so keen on the vaccine? Because, as I said last week, it is only part of the solution. We have many antiviral therapies coming online, like dexamethasone, like remdesivir, and there is a huge trial taking place at Oxford called the Oxford Recovery Trial. We shouldn't just be relying on vaccination. And what does it do to people's mental health? No one can plan Christmas. We have no idea whether we can go away or not going away. The economy is already decimated. The SMEs are only just recovering. So goodness knows how they're going to cope. And then the travel industry themselves, I think they are hanging their heads with frustration. This isn't leadership. This is just chaos.
Can you explain on a medical technical point how it is that the JCVI, the Joint Committee for Vaccination and Immunisation, a few months ago said you should all wait for 6 months after your second vaccination before you have your booster jab. You must wait for 6 months. Suddenly, that's down to 3 months. The government happily telling us, oh, they now say 3 months. Are they just plucking these figures out, these timings, out of thin air?
No, they've been lent on, haven't they? The fact is, actually, if you listen to the Prime Minister and Sajid Javid, he said they both kept stressing the independent JCVI. Well, clearly it's not that independent. And you're right. They came out very strongly and said you need to wait a minimum of 6 months for that second jab, because then your immunity is stronger and it actually gives you a bigger immune response as a result. This is political expediency. By shortening that, it means you can shove more jabs into people's arms, people who, in my opinion, don't need it, including those people who are 12 and over. And I think this is deeply worrying. So the public are stuck in this sort of political football. And the other problem is there is no real opposition, because Labour should be holding the government to account. What I find equally extraordinary is the government is mandating these measures which restricts our freedom, and there has not been a vote on it, or at least there wasn't, I think, until today. But that's not the way to run a democracy. We do not have a functioning government, we don't have a functioning opposition, and we don't have a functioning parliament.
There's every chance, is there not, that 12 to 15-year-olds don't even need one vaccination, but many of them have had that by government order, or at least government request, or coerced government order, shall we say, and now they're being required to have a second jab. My question to you, is that necessary? Is it actually necessary for every adult over the age of 18 to have a booster? Because my understanding is if you've had COVID and you've had a couple of jabs, the booster isn't necessarily required. I mean, What is this obsession? Because there is talk now they're going to lower the age to 5 years old. Right. What is this obsession this government has with vaccinating nearly everybody? Because what they've instantly done, David, as we've just heard the Prime Minister expressing, is they've turned Omicron, the arrival of this variant that we didn't know anything about on last Thursday, into the biggest rallying call for everyone to get vaccinated that we've seen so far. What is their obsession?
Well, one might ask, is there financial incentive? We know many, I'm just speculating. Are there vested interests at play? I think probably the answer is yes. But also we know 93% of adults in this country now have antibodies to COVID. We also know that naturally derived immunity is better than immunity derived from these vaccines, and probably particularly from the mRNA vaccines, which is new technology. We've never used it before. And also in terms of children, as I've said before, children tend to get a self-limiting illness. They don't tend to suffer from long-term sequelae. So therefore, I think it's better for the children to get it. We've moved from a position where COVID is an epidemic to endemic. Now, the real worry here is as this virus mutates and mutates, what is the way out of this? And I think the way out of it is to protect the elderly and vulnerable and let other people get it and develop immunity, as we have done with other illnesses such as the flu, because the solution is not to keep jabbing people. How many jabs are we going to have a year? And at this rate, if you follow with the government's logic, it will be at least 4 a year. And I don't think the public will, accept that. And I don't think they'll play ball.
I have some sympathy for the government, because in these circumstances, you're sort of damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And they're worried that they may lay themselves open to charges, just as they did at the beginning of the pandemic when they were accused of not moving fast enough for 3 weeks, and that was crucial in the development of the virus. I don't think it actually was, but that's what they're worried about. So I've got some sympathy for them. But is it responsible of this government to be reacting in an extreme way, as they are now, to a virus they know nothing about? Would it not have been more responsible to have waited until they knew exactly what we were dealing with in terms of this virus? I gather that kind of process should take about 2 weeks. I mean, but the way they've acted so far is it has reignited widespread fear and panic about COVID.
Completely right, and you see that's the tack I would have taken, is to wait, because the vaccination rollout has been extraordinary and the UK's effort has been amazing. And remember, Astra was made here in the United Kingdom, so the rollout's been amazing, and we are in a far better position than we were this time last year. So I think it would have been more sensible to wait for the data. We keep being told we're being led by science, follow the data. There is no data. So why are they doing this? And clearly Boris is being pushed from many sides politically. But if you also remember, he was criticized for the fact that we were allowed freedoms in the summer. And it turns out that that was the right decision, because it allowed us to gather more natural immunity. And therefore, we believe that the UK is actually in a better position than the rest of mainland Europe. What worries me even more is look what's happening in Europe. I've just seen that in Greece, if you're over 60 and you refuse to be immunized, you will be fined £85 a month until you give in, until you surrender, until you do what the Greek government tell you. That is not acceptable, and it's illiberal.
I agree. And of course, in Austria, it is now against the law not to be vaccinated. Germany's heading that way. More and more European countries are getting tremendously fascistic when it comes to medical matters. Medical apartheid all over the mainland of Europe, and indeed here as well. Don't forget vaccine passports in Wales and Scotland. That's medical apartheid. Will they come to England soon? Last point, really, David. I mean, what is the dark cloud hanging over us now in such a short space of time? This time last week, everyone was looking forward to Christmas. Certainly in England, the worst of it seemed to be over. Suddenly, the sword of Damocles is hanging over us. They might cancel Christmas. That is going to plunge a lot of people into serious depression. They've got to stop playing these mind games, haven't they?
Well, also, elderly people are already struggling. I think people's mental health has really suffered. We've seen, I said last week, that we're now prescribing more antidepressants than ever as a result of what's been going on. And if you look at what they're doing, they say they'll review it in 2 weeks. I actually think it will be in 3 weeks. Number 10, or sources in government said today, it is likely these restrictions will continue. And then actually one of the MPs, Richard Drax, asked Boris Johnson, asked Sajid Javid whether he could rule out the possibility of another lockdown, and he refused to do so. So my money is on more restrictions and a possible lockdown over Christmas. You saw Jenny Harries also saying, don't mix with family and friends if you can help it over Christmas. What are they doing to this country, and what are they doing to families? You know, we don't mind as long as you're honest and you tell us what is the plan. People need to plan, and they need to know what they're doing.
Yeah, lots of the Sage Mob and Sadiq Khan warning us not to socialise in the run-up to Christmas. I mean, good luck with that. It's so
exactly.
It's so depressing. It really is.